Yeah, so we don't even really have to speculate that much because in a lot of these cases, someone does end up saying, hey, I was an intelligence asset. Sorry about all that mess.
Yeah.
And this is a pretty perfect pace for what I had planned because Tupac is where you've probably done the deepest amount of research. And
Mhm.
with the last 10 minutes of the first hour, I want to at least hit the major points of his story. But this interview really came to be because I heard this story about a new search warrant issued for Tupac's murder. And I thought actually going into all that would probably make a good episode. And man, did I learn just so much from your work. Can you give us a bit of an overview of Tupac's parents, the Black Panthers,
Yeah.
and this similar operation to disrupt organized political activism with drugs and intelligence infiltration?
Yeah. So Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, was a one-time leader of the Harlem Black Panthers. Amazing woman who was credited for getting the Black Panther 21 off in court. And so basically, I show the evidence that U.S. intelligence used undercover agents to get her addicted to crack as she continued to do activism against the FBI's counterintelligence program and against other U.S. intelligence programs. And so that really sidelined her life for a while Tupac was growing up impoverished because the FBI was also visiting Afeni Shakur's employers and not letting her get jobs or getting her fired. And then she developed that crack problem. Tupac's stepfather, Mutulu Shakur, had pioneered the use of acupuncture for acupuncture detox for drug addictions in Lincoln Detox in the Bronx, and was spreading it around the country. And so he had some amazing parents, and he grows up and he ends up being at 17 years old. He ends up being elected head of the New African Panthers, which was trying to replicate the Black Panthers and was active in 8 to 10 cities around the country. So Tupac was already a national black leader before he became a rapper. And so he tours with Digital Underground, and then he comes out with his first solo album, and it's a very political album. And his song "Trapped" got its MTV worldwide release. And within several days of that, Oakland police pretend to stop him for jaywalking. They choke him unconscious and pound his head against the curb. And I show the evidence. I argue that other people had died in police custody through those actions, and this was the first attempt on Tupac's life. And then other police connected attempts on Tupac's life included at the Marin City Fest when Tupac's invited for the 50th anniversary of the Marin City Fest. Tupac's an honorary guest, and strangers attack Tupac for no reason. Police watch passively and don't do anything about it. These same strangers have a gun and shoot at Tupac, and he runs away from them. And police only arrest Tupac after only arrest anyone after Tupac crawls under a police car, and these strangers were trying to beat him to death and gotten a crowd to mess with a police car. And so that was yet another attempt to show the evidence how that was another attempt on Tupac's life. And so Tupac was his agenda was he was only pretending to be a gangster in order to appeal to gangs and politicize them to spread a gang peace truce and turn them on to activism. And that was a major threat to the U.S. intelligence drug traffickers, because their low-level dealers were these gangs. And so when you took all these gang members off the street and stopped them from drug dealing, and you get this gang peace truce movement and turn on to activism spreading around the country and getting all these gangs stopping dealing drugs, such as it spread to the New York Latin Kings, the largest gang in New York, that was 3,000 strong and had vowed to stop dealing drugs, as documented by some New York professors. You see that's affecting the CIA drug traffickers' money, along with the money launderers' money. The banks are laundering tons of money, according to the United Nations report on money laundering through banks and stock market portfolios. And it gets into the tune of billions of dollars being threatened by Tupac and his Black Panther extended families' activism around this issue. And so this is some of what he was doing behind the scenes for why there would be these attempts on his life. And so then you get to Atlanta where he's doing a concert. And so some reportedly off-duty cops were beating on someone. Tupac said what's going on. They went over to his car, according to both white and black eyewitnesses, took a gun that they had stolen from a police evidence locker, smashed the car window Tupac was in, and shot at him. And Tupac merely rolled out the back, grabbed a security guard's gun, and shot back in self-defense in Atlanta. And so Tupac, the trial never went forward completely because obviously it was a botched assassination attempt, at least number 3 or so. And so this is the way things were going for Tupac. And finally, they set him up on this sexual abuse charge, where this woman in court, I have the court documents saying she kissed his penis on a dance floor and had consensual sex with him that night, and then he gets convicted only of touching her butt against her will after what the jury found was consensual sex, which is absolutely bizarre, and gets 1.5 to 4.5 years in a maximum security prison for that, which again is absolutely bizarre. And so they did that to mess his mind up in prison. Meanwhile, just before that verdict came out, there was another attempt on his life where they shot him once to get him down the ground, where he was face down the ground, and shot him twice in the skull, which is an execution tactic of U.S. intelligence. And these 2 bullets just miraculously barely missed his brain, according to the doctor's affidavit, on the bullets going through one side, the back of the skull, and out the front of the skull, but barely missing his brain. And so, again, another assassination attempt. Police were monitoring him at that time. The same police that showed up at the sexual assault charge showed up immediately at that charge on the opposite side of New York City. And then he's in prison. Death row gets him out of prison. Death row is filled with dozens and dozens of police officers at all levels of their company, Death Row Records. And an honest cop, Detective Russell Poole, says, what were all these officers doing? He asked the superiors, what are they doing in this company? And his superior said, you can call them troubleshooters or covert agents. And so they thought that he would, keep a closed mouth on this, and that he would be part of it all, being white, and thinking, he would join this racist agenda. But he didn't. He blew the whistle on that and came out with it. Now, he didn't know why it was all going on. They didn't tell him the full spectrum of it all. He didn't know that, how activist Tupac really was and all that. But he came out with it. He came out. He was forced to leave his investigation of the Biggie Smalls murder. He was the official investigator on the Biggie Smalls murder. Biggie Smalls was collateral damage made, to look like the East-West, versus East Coast versus West Coast rap war, just as diversion for what was really happening, which was Death Row Records was trafficking drugs, trafficking guns, trying to end the Bloods versus Crips peace truce, and then setting up Tupac for assassination. And once they were successful in that, Death Row basically, was done what it needed to do. And Suge Knight went to jail. Suge Knight was low level intelligence, like just low man on the totem pole. Dave Kenner was much higher on the totem pole, being the white real owner of Death Row Records. And Reggie Wright was higher on the totem pole, being the head of security, a police officer who was head of security of these dozens of police officers in Death Row. And Reggie Wright's father, Reggie Wright Sr., was head of the gang division in Compton, where the first peace truce between the Bloods and Crips happened. And so this is the way it all played out and worked out. And here's all that evidence. Now, police come in and say they're searching this guy named Keefe D. Davis's home. That stems from a police officer who came in 5 to 10 years after Russell Poole's investigation. And Russell Poole said Greg Kading was a disgraced cop who was found openly lying in court. He was kicked off the force when he was caught lying in court. But then he is brought out of retirement to be a disinformation agent, basically, to make up this whole story about this Crip, how the Crips killed Tupac, and based on the original setup of Tupac's murder, which was getting a nephew of this Crip member, this guy Orlando Anderson, who got a lot of money. According to Nick Broomfield, he received a lot of money to take a beating for a setup of a scuffle in the MGM Hotel after the Mike Tyson fight. So people convinced Tupac to be part of this little scuffle with this guy Orlando Anderson. After that, Anderson didn't do anything, but after about an hour or two later, there's a drive-by shooting that kills Tupac in Las Vegas. Now, Keefe D says that it was him and his nephew Orlando Anderson that did this, carried out the murder. But Gray Kading also says that Biggie Smalls brought $1 million from Puffy, from P. Diddy, to Las Vegas, somehow gave it to Keefe D to give to Orlando Anderson to kill Tupac. Now, that's just ridiculous. Nobody saw 350-pound top-selling rapper Biggie Smalls in Las Vegas that night. Nobody. And there's tapes of Biggie Smalls recording in New Jersey at the night of the Mike Tyson fight where Tupac was assassinated, And so it's just an absurd story that Gray Kading came out with in a book and film. And, so Detective Kading, and, all these TV series try to present Detective Gray Kading as something legitimate, which he wasn't at all. He's a disinformation agent. His story is absurd. His book's absurd. Russell Poole said that Gray Kading never asked him anything before Russell Poole was murdered in police department trying to give new evidence on who really shot Tupac. And this is the way it all really went down, and now they're reviving it because nobody's really buying. Well, at least a smaller and smaller percentage of people are buying Gray Kading's ridiculous story, or that. And basically, Keefe D was offered full leniency from facing decades in prison on a drug charge in order just to say whatever he would say, and he said what they told him to say, which is that yes, I carried out Tupac's murder with my now dead nephew, because there's the cover up of killing Orlando Anderson 2 years after Tupac's killing too, and so he gets let off of decades in prison just to say what they want him to say, and they got that on tape, and they say that that's great evidence of who really killed Tupac. So they're just trying to revive that, that bogus story.
Right. Yes, a lot of details in this one, and that's a pretty good summary. I wanted to emphasize a few parts of the story for people. So Mutulu Shakur, who you mentioned, had established this acupuncture protocol for addiction. This is something we've seen time and time again. People with alternative health cures are often, let's say, neutralized in one way or another. Yeah. But he was basically made a patsy for this robbery of Brinks trucks. You go into the details of that. He basically was put in jail on a false charge, let's just say, for many, many years. And it was when he was in jail that him and Tupac concocted the gangster rap persona to gain influence and then, as you noted, convert the gang culture to Black Panther activism, uplifting their community and these sorts of things. And when Mutulu was in jail, this is when Tupac's mother had a really difficult time raising two kids, and they inserted Kenneth Legs Saunders into her life, who got her hooked on crack. And Legs worked for Nikki Baines.
Yeah,
police claimed Nicky Barnes, who police claimed was Harlem's biggest drug dealer, nicknamed Mr. Untouchable. He was a successor to Frank Matthews, one of the first New York drug kingpins who was Black. 9 people supplying drugs to Matthews had their drug importation charges dropped due to their CIA involvement. So this is another example of inserting an asset into the life of an activist. And basically, they broke up the family, which was really the start of what caused this problem for the Shakur family. And I've heard some Tupac music back in the day from friends who were really into him, and it was incredibly violent. And I didn't really see this whole side of Tupac being an elevator or anything like that. But you note in the book and film that a lot of that music came out when he had signed with Death Row Records. They crafted that image and kind of amplified the negativity in all that. And he signed with Death Row when he was in prison. So they do all this psychological torture to him when he's in prison. And before they let him out, they make him sign with Death Row Records, which is a new set of handlers for the whole thing. And It really is just a wild story. And those are some of the just added details that I found interesting. And as you said, he wanted to broker peace deals between the gangs, and he had a gang code of conduct he was promoting, like this 10 commandments for gang life, which was kind of the start of twisting the violence away from, their everyday life and instead going into an activist and uplifting kind of direction. And that's no small thing. In the film, you play a great clip from Catherine Austin Fitts, who talks about these inner city street gangs and just how much money they were funneling up. She said street dealers could make about $100,000 a year for each person for a supplier, who then laundered through a network of establishments that dealt in cash, like banks and restaurants. And they were using illiterate teenagers to generate 2 to 3 million in stock value for major corporations. Getting these gangs out of drug dealing, as you say, would cost billions. This is how to make that connection between low-level street drug dealing and billions of dollars for the establishment. And you also note that George Bush Sr. sort of got involved here and organized resources to stop the gang truce movement. And of course, Tupac was a big part of that. And so I also didn't realize that Tupac's father actually got out of prison in 2022 and then died July 6th, 2023, this year. And the new search warrant in Tupac's death was issued July 18th, just a few days later after Mutulu Shakur's death. That's oddly coincidental. Yeah. Are there other aspects to this story in that regard, in this new phase that should be talked about? Can you believe it, people? A video clip and a peek into how that sweet THC sausage is made. For some people, I'm sure it's nice to put a face to the name, so I started making clips that are a little more YouTube friendly than the full show tends to be. Get the full show on any podcasting platform. I prefer to keep it audio only, so we have a more decentralized distribution for a controversial show, and also so I can edit out the ums and ahs and barking dogs and all the things that happen when a person records in their home environment. And then if you really like the show, you can sign up for THC Plus, and instead of 1 hour interviews, you get the full 2 hour interview for just $8. I think that's a better deal, more of a win-win than asking you to support the show by booking a therapy session or buying generic Viagra. It's getting weird out there, folks. So just go to the highersidechats.com or click the link at the top of any set of show notes, and all your wildest dreams will come true. All right? All right. The Higherside Chat Show. Greg Carwood.